All right, so today I'm live with live coding Python and AWS. So the idea here is to build out things that I can code really quickly and demonstrate, how these things work, and we can do that in a second. So one of the ways that we can do this uh, is to build this out, and let's go ahead and do that real quick. Uh, let's go ahead and yeah, 1 second here. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into here and build out step functions. So to get started here, let me just start off with just showing like a hello world step function here. And in terms of step functions, the idea is that you can throw in a state, for example, uh, hello world example here, do some different operations, and then depending on what it is you're doing, um, basically do some form of automation. And so what we can do here is go ahead and create a new state machine that's like a basic type of state machine, and we can visually design it. We could also do a sample project. Really depends on what kind of thing that we want to start with here. And so in this particular scenario, one of the sample projects that we can look through is ETL, or we could orchestrate Lambda functions, or we could send a message to EventBridge. This is always, I think, a good way to get started, is to look at some of these sample projects and figure out like, okay, which one of these sounds like a fun one to do. And it gives you some ideas of what you can actually do with step functions. So for example, orchestrate a Lambda. Let's go ahead and look at that real quick. What would that look like? If we go ahead and we do that, you can see here that I could check a stock price, and then I would build out a Lambda. So it's nice. It doesn't do everything for you, but it gives you some ideas of how you would actually build out a step function, like a job puller. Here's another one. We could do tuning a machine learning model as another one, basically calling into SageMaker. A task timer is another one. You wait for some kind of a timestamp, and then you would then send a message via SNS, right? So these are a few things to play around with. I think what I'm going to do is build out a really simple um, uh, step function that is able to uh, really echo out, like a hello world kind of a workflow. Like, for example, what I could do is like maybe create a meal. That would be a kind of a fun one to play around with. And so I would need to first design my workflow in code, and then essentially build out the Lambda functions that would be associated with it. And so we could start with this, and we could just say, okay, let's go ahead and build this. And inside of this studio here, it's up to me to then design some kind of workflow. So like, what is it that I want to do? And so the first state potentially would be, the first part of my action, and then the second one would be the second part of my action. So if I go through here and I drag this in, I would need to actually specify a Lambda function. So here we get into the issue of, well, do I need to actually build out a Lambda function that does something? And so probably it would make sense to diagram something. So what I can do is actually go to, is I could go to sketch and try to sketch out really quick some kind of a workflow that would make sense. So let's go ahead and try this out. So if I was going to build out a step function, and I would pick a shape of some kind. Let's go ahead and pick this, and we'll call this, maybe this is our original state here. And then we could build, maybe two of these, second one, and then we could build out a arrow of some kind as well. So let's see here. Could do an arrow, and we could build out another one, something like that. And then I could go here and I could copy this. Right. So kind of a fun way to build out your architecture is to just sketch it out first. And so if let's say that I wanted to, in this first flow here, build out a generate a random fruit. So this one would be generate random fruit, and then depending on what the fruit is, we could decide what kind of meal is it. Is it breakfast, lunch, or dinner, right? And so we could have a second one here that would say, depending on which fruit, return the meal type, right? So it would be either breakfast, lunch, dinner. So we make something really, really simple. That kind of workflow. So now that I've got that sorted out here, I can go back now to AWS and kind of build this kind of a structure out. So the first thing that I would probably do would be to build out a Lambda function that is able to generate a random fruit. And so there's a couple ways we could do this. I'm going to go ahead and use Cloud9 or GitHub Copilot, probably Copilot. Let's go ahead and start with that. Let's go ahead and try that out. And if I go to AWS here, Assimilate AWS, I can do this, and I can just select this. All right. So in terms of building on a Lambda function, a couple different ways that we could try this out. I mean, we could first explore that. We could first explore that I could use AWS and do --help to just see what options are available. I think AWS Lambda LS, does that work? There we go. Lambda. So if we just say AWS Lambda, it gives us a bunch of different options that we could do here. And we could say list. I think we can just say list functions. Yeah. So let's go ahead and do that. So we could even, one of the nice things about the command line is that, look, we can see all these different functions here and kind of play around with them. So now that I've got that, that would definitely be one way to play around with it, is to just, I could basically interact with it this way. And so what I could do is I could actually use the command line here to interact with it, but I also could use just the console itself to build it out. And so if I go to, let's go back to the console. Let's try Cloud9. Let's see if we can actually use the interface for building Lambdas here to build things out. So I'm going to go ahead and do an environment that would be an easy one to play around with. So let's go ahead and say create a new environment, and we'll call this Assimilate AWS. We'll say this is for live coding AWS. And I can just pick a large instance. I don't need to go crazy. And we'll just go ahead and get this thing cooking. And then what I can do as well is use the built-in tools that are available with Cloud9 to prototype things a little bit more quickly. And that is one of the nice things about Cloud9 is that it does have very good support for building out tools. So I'm going to go ahead and select this now. Go ahead and open up in Cloud9, and it isn't available. So we have to go back to the dashboard. I haven't had something like this happen in quite some time, but I'm going to just delete it. And what I could do is, if you do get a weird error like this, is that I already have one here. I'm just going to use one I already have. Just keep it simple. And I'll just repurpose this existing environment. I like to do one-to-one where I have something that's exactly the one repo that I'm working with, but I can just check out a new repo inside of here, because if I go to repository and I go to SSH, we copy this, I can go over to this example and it should work very well. So let's go ahead and try this one out. All right. So there might be some issues then. I wonder if Cloud9 has some problems. Well, I'll try a third one. Not that big of a deal if I have an issue with this, because I have lots of ways to develop Lambda functions, but there could be a problem with AWS today. I'm not 100% sure. Let's try this one. Well, looking promising. There we go. So whatever, I don't know what the issue was with that other one, but I'm gonna just go ahead and go here, and we'll just say git clone, and I can clone my repo that I was playing around with, Assimilate AWS. So now, to really, really quickly make progress, one of the things that we can do is if I go to AWS and I go to my region, I can actually go to Lambda here, and I could just right click and I can say create same application. This is probably one of the quickest ways to just build a function. Let's go ahead and do that. And notice it tells you to pick runtimes. It's kind of interesting that the two most common are either Python 3.9 or Node. Let's go ahead and pick a just a Python 3.9 here, and x86 is fine. And I think we can just do a basic. Now this is kind of cool because you could grab some of the sample boilerplate code, but I know what I'm doing, so I'm just going to go ahead and pick this one, and then it's going to ask which folder to put it into. I'm going to put it into this one right here. Enter a name for your new application. We're going to call this one random fruit. Lambda. Here we go. about that. And then it says developing AWS, and it gives us a bunch of cool stuff here. Created same application, added launch configuration. So that's kind of nice, right? It did all kinds of really cool stuff for us. And it tells us like essentially how to deploy it and all kinds of other stuff. So if I go back to here and we go into this repo and we look for random fruit lambda, there it is. There's the one that was created. Now, inside of here, we should see the application. So this is where I would then need to go through here and get it working. So let's go ahead and do new file, go run. Got to find the terminal. Every time I close the terminal inside this environment, it always screws me up. It is under go to view, find, edit, file. Wow, terminal is very, very challenging to new terminal. There you go. It's not obvious how to actually build this out, but actually once you close this window too, it's a little bit tricky to put them side by side. Maybe I can do that. There we go. That's a little bit better. And then we can do this here. I would prefer it to be like that. I want it the other way. Let's do this down here. Let's pull this guy here. There we go. Took me a little bit, but I got it. So if we look at this JSON file here, you can see all the stuff that comes in. We can delete this. We don't need it. And then it's nice that you get a little sample here. So we're just going to say from the random, or we're going to say from random import choices. We don't even care what's passed into this, right? Because we're just going to say fruits, or yeah, fruits like this. We just put in some fruits. We're going to say like apple and banana. I'm actually kind of curious though, because Code Whisper is in here. You can see Code Whisper is doing some cool stuff. Whoa, like, and I can just make some really simple logic that says like basically return JSON dumps message. We can do this. We can say JSON dumps. And we can say basically choice or fruit is equal to choices fruits. There we go. And then we can just say fruit. So that'll just grab some random fruit here. And then if I want to, I think I could say make refactor. Let's go ahead and see where I'm at. So I need to cd into this repo. And then I need to say make refactor. So anytime I use one of these fancy tools, I like to refactor my code so it's not as ugly. We don't care about that one. We care about this one. Oh, it's weird though. It didn't find. Oh, because I need to tell it about this one. So we can basically say we can change our makefile here to actually. It's weird how we can change our makefile here to be to cover the random fruit lambda and fruit lambda py. If I go back in here, So it would be in hello world, random fruit world. Something like that. If I do refactor, random fruit lambda, random fruit. Not sure why that's not showing up here, but I'll skip this for now because I don't. It's not super vital. In fact, I can even do a black command manually if I needed to. But basically, we have return, we have this, and now to invoke it, I should be able to invoke it locally if I remember how to do this, which is that you can. I guess I could look at the documentation here. So it says README. Let's look at this. And it says this project contains this. Hello world. This is the code. Invocation. That's what you can use to test it. And then it says to build and deploy it, run the following in your shell. SAM build, SAM deploy. The first command to build your application with the SAM and test locally, we would say SAM build container. To test a function. So in this case, we don't. Well, let's try this. Let's see if we can just invoke this locally. So if we do that, does that work? No such. I think I need to change that. And if I change into random fruit here, and now I run it, what happens? There we go. We're able to invoke this thing and get it working. It is a little convoluted to if you have a lot of other code in your repo, things get a little bit less clear about testing things, but it did actually look, there we go. I was able to get my random fruit. So I feel pretty good about deploying this. So let's go ahead and deploy this thing now because it was a really simple one to build. So let's just say to build and deploy for the first time, we just want to do SAM build like that. Ooh. And I think the issue is say Python 3.9. It's not available. So yeah, this is where things get a little bit tricky because if we say Python, see it's Python 3.7, that could definitely be an issue. I probably shouldn't have done that, which is easy to fix because I'll just copy this code. And in fact, just to be lazy, I guess what I'll do is I'll just switch gears here and just go right into the Lambda and just make it real quick. Hard coded. Just make Lambda because it's like a random fruit. Not Python. Latest supported. It is weird how the Cloud9 doesn't support Python 3.9. You know, but so there's some weird things that happen sometimes when you're building Lambda. There's a lot of ways to build Lambda, but I found that building in the console in some scenarios is the laziest possible way to build it. And now if I just swap this out, there we go. Pretty easy to test. And in fact, if I want to test it, I mean, there's nothing to test. There's just hello world. We don't even need to change anything because it's just going to return back random fruit. And we can just call this hello. There. So that part was easy. we just test it. There you go. Hello from, wait a second. Oh, I didn't deploy it. There we go. Now we test it. There we go. So see, you can see that the fruits change constantly. Now, this is actually overkill. I don't really want that. I actually want to make it even simpler. I just want to return back the fruit. Just do that. There we go. Even easier. So we got a super simple function. It's deployed. Now, I can just build one more real quick, Lambda. Build this really, really quick, which is this one will be the meal, and we'll make this one 3.9. And all I need to say, just make something kind of really simple, which just if it finds like one of the fruits, let's see what kind of fruits do I have in here. So I have so if it's an apple, it's breakfast. If it's a banana, it's lunch. Otherwise, it's dinner. I'll just make something really silly. So we'll go through here and we'll just basically say, if event I'm thinking out here. If the event, and we'll call it, we'll tweak this a little bit because we want to return back a payload like this. We want to say item, and then we'll say fruit like that. So we'll deploy, and then we'll test it. And we'll test it. Woo. And then for the test events, we'll just slightly configure it. And we'll say like format. What did I change here? Return item. Huh, why does that not work? Oh, I must have some kind of syntax. Return fruit. Deploy. Null. So that works. If I say fruit payload equal to name fruit. How about that? I say return payload. What happens then? Deploy. Name. So then I can just change this to item. There we go. Whoops. That's weird. Eight. Super weird. That why I don't understand why that's. Well, let's just call this name again. I don't know why that's having a problem. That's strange. There you go. Name. Okay, so then I can go here. If event name is equal to apple, we'll return back meal. Actually, we can make it even simpler. We could just return back dinner. And then we can say if event is name is equal to banana. So check. So if it's banana, then we'll say lunch. And then otherwise return back breakfast. A silly thing, but we'll deploy it. We'll configure a test event, and we'll just call this breakfast or meal or something like that. And we just go through here. And we just say name Apple. Add it, save it, test it. There we go. Right. So we know this works. So now we got all that we need to do to build a step function. And so I'm going to go back to step functions really quick here. And step functions do is we're just going to make a real quick one. And we'll just invoke a Lambda. And we will say the first Lambda is going to be my random fruit right there. And then we're going to pull a second Lambda right here. And so the first one will just be like the state name will be like, like make a random fruit. Make a random fruit. There you go. And then the second one will be to make a meal. There we go. So this one will make a meal. And then all we have to do is pick the meal. There we go, my meal. And that should be it. So if I go to next, we can see here all of the step function stuff. And if I want to go to this, format it, perfect. And we'll call this random meal or something like that. And we just say create new rule. We could even log this to CloudWatch logs. Sure. And let's create it. Can be useful if you're going to build something that you cared about debugging to do that. Actually, would be a very good idea. And then to start it, it just needs a random payload, I believe. I guess it's optional. It used to be mandatory. And then we just have to say some kind of a comment. Now, remember, it doesn't do anything because the first one doesn't take an input, but we can just say like, give me a random fruit. Right. So we can basically start the execution. And so there we go. We can look at the first one here. We can look at the second one. And so if we want to look at choose a step, there we go. I was like, why didn't it show up? There's the comment I put in. And what did it do? It returned back mango. But because mango, we didn't have any logic for it, what it does at the very end, if we click on the next one, is it says output is break. So I guess output is going to be breakfast. Now it is weird how it's cutting off that. It's actually cutting off that string, which is kind of strange actually. But if we run it again, new execution, we can look at it. Now it's a durian, make a meal, and now it says breakfast. So somehow Lambda is like grabbing. I don't know why this is the payload is slightly mutilated, but I've never seen that before. But regardless, it almost works. It works. There we go. There's a lime, and here's there we go. Breakfast break. So how would I actually invoke this thing even more? So this is where the command line is kind of fun. Is what I could do is I could grab the ARN here. If I just copy this, and if I go over to my other environment here, which is in GitHub, which has credentials set up, let's go ahead and say, let's see if we can figure out how to do this. So we know that the ARN is going to be this, and we can say AWS step function. Oh, let's try that. Step function. AWS, and we just need to find the step functions. Step functions. AWS. We could even be lazy and just say AWS CLI step functions. Just crib something from here. We want to remotely, there we go. We want to do start execution. So this hopefully should be very, very easy. I have done it before in the past, but basically this is the ARN of the machine to, I think it's this. We don't even need to do an input because it's optional. So I believe we can just, we want to do version 2. You're viewing visa. So we want to click here. And so AWS step function, I think, is one word, and then just start execution. So let's try this. So we'll go back to here. So we're going to type in AWS step function, AWS step function, start execution, and then we just need to do the ARN, which is this. And then I think I can just grab the last payload. There we go. Grab this. I could even put it into a variable, which is probably not horrible. So if I just said export ERN or something like that, and just put it into a payload like that, I just say echo $sign ERN. So we have ARN. So if I do this, and do ARN, does that work? Oh, step functions. Okay, so we can go here and say step functions plural. Resource type not valid in this context. So now we just need to figure out how to actually execute it. Execution ARN random meal IAM ARN actions. Maybe we can list, we could find out what this one is called. So we can say AWS step functions list list state machines. Let's see if we can find it. And so we want to do meal generator. Wait, what did I call this thing? I called this random meal. Random meal. So we want to find random. So we can just do a grep random meal. There we go. So in theory, that would be the ARN that we would use. And so if I just grab this here, we have to do S. Oh, there we go. I was able to execute it. And if we go back here, we should be able to go to state machines. There we go. And this was just orchestrated again. And if we click on it, not sure why it takes a second to execution started. There we go. Durian. Now I could put a payload in there to show, like, if we want to do input, let's do input. Let's do that. The string that contains a JSON. If you don't, yeah, let's try -- input. And then you do string. Let's try that. So let's do it again. let's do input, and then let's put in something like this, and we can just put in a comment, and we can say like GitHub. So I know that somebody invoked it. Does that work? Oh, expecting double quote to start field name. So, oh, well, I could just steal this. How about that? Let's just steal exactly their example. I can say first name GitHub. Oh, there you go. That looks good. And if we go back to step functions, leave, here we go. We should see the latest one. And we click on it. And if we see the start of it, there we go. There's my payload. So I was able to actually execute it. Now, again, I don't know why there's an issue here, but you can see pretty easy to very, very quickly prototype stuff out using step functions. All right, that's a wrap for today. I'll be back in a couple weeks to code some more AWS.